mentioned in the previous lesson that musical form should grow organically from musical ideas. If we understand the basic principles of musical form in a general, psychological way, this will allow us to work out the appropriate destiny of a musical idea without forcing it into an existing formal stereotype. Of course, if the composer has a commission, that will determine some aspects of the piece, like the ensemble and the duration. If the piece is programmatic, the story will influence the form as well. But the real work of composition begins when we start to explore the potential of our musical ideas. The character of the musical idea has an important role in determining the way the form develops. In general, the more dramatic the character you're aiming at, the less you'll want forms that are simply, obviously symmetrical. This is because surprises are a big part of drama, and the more symmetrical the form, the more predictable the form becomes. It's interesting to note that Beethoven changed some of the conventional forms of his time specifically to make them more dramatic and emotionally volatile. This is a big subject in itself, but for now I'll just mention how he took the standard ternary form, usually the third movement of a symphony in Mozart's time, and transformed it into his own scherzo form. This acts like a ternary form at the start, but then surprises the listener in the way it develops. I'll be talking more about Beethoven's formal innovations eventually in my analysis for composers course. In any case, once you have some idea of the dimensions and character of the piece you want to write, your first step should be to make several sketches along those lines. Here's a simple example that we'll explore here. As I've presented it here, this idea has a rather lyrical character, but note that it contains three different motives, which I've labeled A, B, and C. That already implies more than a short piece for solo piano. In general, the more contrasts there are in a musical idea, the more time it will take to develop it. Each of these three motives could in fact develop into a whole phrase or two on its own, and they could also be recombined in numerous ways. For example, here I've taken motives A and C and developed them a bit. This could go on for quite a while. For the moment, I've completely ignored motive B. We can see already here how the contrasts within the original idea have many implications for its development. But this isn't all. It's also worth exploring your initial idea in various different characters. For example, here are two variants of the initial idea, but with different tempi, articulations, dynamics, and register. Here's a rather aggressive version. And here's a more playful version. And now, a kind of lyrical conversation between wind instruments. So our original idea has lots of potential for development. We could use any one of these variants in a substantial piece, and create important contrast by using one or more of the other versions. Or we could add other ideas for contrast. The one thing that's already clear is that this idea needs more time to evolve than a 1-minute prelude for piano could provide. So the first step when composing is simply to explore your idea's potential. By playing with the most salient dimensions of the music, like tempo, timbre, register, and so on, you will often discover possibilities you never would have thought of. I call this cheap thrills, lots of possibilities with very little effort. If you have more than one idea to begin with, explore each one in this way. Then you need to look at the various possibilities for combining your ideas. For example, how about starting with the aggressive version, reaching a powerful climax with it, and then suddenly contrasting it with the lyrical woodwind version? Or perhaps starting with the playful version, and then having it gradually become more and more contrapuntal, as in the first variant. Only by exploring your ideas in depth like this can you begin to see how your form should evolve. Inevitably, you will prefer some versions of the ideas to others, and some combinations over others. And once you've settled on a particular combination, you need to think about whether you want to juxtapose them suddenly, or to have one gradually evolve into another. In other words, what kind of transition do you need between them? Or you might decide that at one point in the movement the progression should be gradual, but later on you can make the contrast much more dramatic and sudden. This is a lot like writing a novel where you gradually explore various relationships between the characters. And that, of course, requires exploring each character's individual potential in detail. Once you've explored the variants and possible interactions between your ideas, then you need to start thinking about the other salient moments in the movement, the beginning, climax, and ending. You want to capture the listener's attention by beginning with a strong character, whatever it may be. So, which idea makes the best beginning? Music should eventually progress to one or more climaxes. Which versions of your idea or ideas would be most suitable for that? Do you want to end with a huge climax or by gradually fading out? Again, experiment with the individual idea to find the most convincing ending. When you do this, there are usually so many possibilities that the problem will ultimately be how to choose the best ones. Developing this kind of thinking does of course require some experience with more or less standard forms, but they should be taught in a way that focuses on what you can generalize from them, as opposed to just filling in the dots. And this is what is meant by having a sense of form.